Scotland's national hero carries a name built on an old word for foreigner, Wallace, in the records of his own century, Le Wallace, the Welshman, the Briton, the name a country gave to the people it considered not quite its own. That is the first thing the film never told you. And it is the gentlest. Braveheart ends with one word, shouted from a scaffold, and a sword hurled at Bannockburn. The record ends on the 23rd of August, 1305, with a man dragged through London behind horses, and what was left of him sent to 4 separate towns. The men who organised it wrote down what the day cost. That account still exists. The true story of Braveheart is darker than the film. Not because the film lied about the man, because at almost every point where the film and the record disagree, it is the record that is harder to watch. Here is what this film covers, what the record actually holds about William Wallace, which is less than you think, and stranger. The poem that stands between the man and the movie. The bridge that Hollywood deleted from the Battle of Stirling Bridge, and the commander it deleted along with it. A Scottish victory so savage that an English chronicle claims a trophy was taken from a man's body. The 4 famous inventions, each one dated to its century. The ending, exactly as 1305 wrote it down. And then one more thing. Because there is one thing Braveheart got right, something no historian will give it. And along the way, the only heart in this story ever actually called brave. It is not the one you think. Stay for that. Every week we trace another name. If yours should be next, subscribe and drop it below. Start with the name, because the name is the oldest true thing we have. 12th century records around the Clyde write men down as Wallensis, the Welsh speaker, the Briton. The same old root gave Ireland Walsh and England Wallace, Welch and Welsh. Not one family, one word, for the people marked as from somewhere else. If you carry any of those names, the word inside your name is the word inside his. So, Scotland's truest son most likely carried in his surname the memory of an older people, possibly the Britons of Strathclyde, whose Cumbric tongue was a close cousin of Welsh. Here is how thin his record truly is. Across his whole life, the documents issued in William Wallace's own name number 4. 2 letters of protection, 1 charter, and 1 letter to the merchants of Lubeck, 1297. The only original, and it survives in Germany to this day. That letter carries the only seal we have that speaks for Wallace himself. Its damaged legend has been read as William, son of Alan Wallace, son of Alan. For 5 centuries, tradition has said his father was Sir Malcolm of Elderslie. The one original document in his name points instead to Alan, and maybe to Ayrshire, the most famous Scot in the world, and we cannot be certain who his father was or where he was born. Remember that gap? A gap that size is exactly the space a legend needs. Much of what you think you know about William Wallace comes from a poem. It was composed around 1477 by a minstrel called Blind Harry. That is 172 years after Wallace died. The distance between the man and his legend is the distance between us and the reign of Queen Victoria. Harry's Wallace is some 12,000 lines of heroic vengeance. It gives Wallace a murdered wife and revenge as the spark of his war. No document of the time records her, even her name, Marion, came later. The poem gives him the father the seal contradicts. It gives him victories no chronicle mentions. In 1722 the poem was modernised, and later tradition called it the most owned book in Scotland after the Bible. When Hollywood came looking for Wallace, this legend is what it found. The screenwriter said it himself. An impressionistic painting, not a collection of facts. Braveheart is not a documentary that got things wrong. It is a film raised on a poem that was already legend when it was written. Hold the film to the record though, and something stranger appears. The record is not kinder than the poem. It is darker. Chronicle tradition picks Wallace up in May 1297 in Lanark, killing the English sheriff William Heselrigg. The killing is certain. 8 years later, the English wrote it into his death sentence. By September, he stands with an army at Stirling, alongside a second commander the film never names, Andrew Murray. Remember him. Here is the battle the film shows as an open field. A great English army had to cross the Forth on a wooden bridge wide enough for 2 horsemen abreast. The Scots, under Wallace and Murray, waited on the high ground while it fed itself across a bottleneck, 2 by 2. When as many had crossed as they believed they could destroy, they came down and closed the bridge. The men on the wrong bank were trapped against the river and destroyed. The rest could only watch. It was a crushing victory, won by reading a bridge. And the film caught the one thing that explains it. The bridge got in the way of the story. What the film also cut is what came after. The English treasurer of Scotland, Hugh de Cressingham, died on that field. 3 separate chronicles record what was done to his body. It was flayed, and one of them, an English one, goes further. It claims William Wallace had a sword belt made from the skin. That is the trophy we promised you at the start. The film gave you a battle without a bridge. The record gives you a victory you would not want to watch to the end. And Andrew Murray, the co-commander named beside Wallace on the Lubeck letter itself. Later tradition says he was wounded at Stirling Bridge. He was dead within months, still a young man. The film erased him so completely that his name is not spoken once. The record splits its victory between 2 men. Only one of them lived to become the legend. And that winter, the record shows you a Wallace the film would never dare film. He led his army south into northern England and burned it, towns, manors and villages, through Northumberland and toward Carlisle in the freezing November of 1297. Years later, his death sentence would charge him with sparing neither age nor sex, monk nor nun. Those are the winning side's words. But the burning is not in dispute. Hold on to this. The record's Wallace is darker than the film's Wallace too. The film cleaned everyone. The record cleans no one. By the spring, the record calls him a knight and guardian of Scotland. Who knighted him, it does not say. Now the famous ones. Datable, every single one. The blue face paint belongs to the painted Britons Caesar described, more than 1300 years before Stirling Bridge. Whether even they truly used woad is doubted. On Wallace's men it is 2 civilizations out of date. The kilts. The first clear description of the belted plaid, the Great Kilt, appears in the 1590s, 300 years after Wallace. And Wallace was a lowlander besides. It is like dressing Shakespeare in a t-shirt. Prima nocta, the right of the lord to the bride's first night. No credible evidence has ever been found that it existed as law or practice. Not in England, not in Scotland, not anywhere in medieval Europe. The film needed a villain's decree. History declined to provide one. And Isabella of France. In the film, she loves Wallace and carries his child. In 1305, Isabella was a child herself, 9 or 10 years old, living in France. She married England's next king in 1308, more than 2 years after Wallace was dead. Her son, the future king, was born 7 years after that scaffold at Smithfield. The arithmetic is not close. It is not even in the same decade. Falkirk, then, where the film stages its great betrayal. The real defeat needed no traitor in a masked helm. Anglo-Welsh arrows broke the Scottish spear rings, and the knights finished what the arrows started. The Scottish cavalry left the field, and the winning side's chroniclers called it desertion, though they would. But Robert the Bruce, personally unmasking himself as Wallace's betrayer on that field. No source of the time places him there. Historians doubt he was at Falkirk at all. The Bruce betrayal is pure invention, which matters because of what the record does next. It supplies a Scot who really did hand Wallace to England. Everything so far, the film softened by accident, by compressing, by romancing. What comes next, even this film looked away from. Now, the record does something unnerving. It nearly loses him. After Falkirk, Wallace resigns the guardianship and drops out of the light. For 7 years, elusive, hunted, a rumour. A letter from the King of France commends his unspecified business to French agents at the papal court. What that business was, the record never says. In 1304, the Scottish nobles made their peace with Edward. The terms were generous, as these things go. For one man, there were no terms at all, only Edward's will and mercy. He lasted 18 more months. In the first days of August, 1305, near Glasgow, at a place tradition names Rob Royston, William Wallace was taken, not by an English patrol. The record names the man responsible for his seizure, Sir John de Menteith, a Scottish knight, keeper of Dumbarton Castle for the English crown. Scottish tradition never forgave him. It calls him the false Menteith to this day. The film invented a betrayal by Bruce. The record supplies something colder. The man who handed Wallace to England was a Scot. What follows is the part the film could not show you, and the record wrote down with care. He was taken south to London. On the 23rd of August, in Westminster Hall, he was crowned with a mocking garland. Laurel in most tellings, oak in some, for a claim, so the story goes, that he would one day wear a crown there. He was permitted no plea. The verdict existed before the trial did. A London annalist of the day records only that he denied the treason. The famous answer that he could never betray a king who was never his king was written for him centuries later. The legend, adding one more line, sentence and execution came the same day. He was dragged behind horses across London from Westminster to Smithfield, hanged, beheaded, his entrails burned, his body divided into 4 parts. That much is in the official account written within the year, and the earliest record of that day is a royal expense roll. The clerks costed it. A chronicle kept at Westminster adds what the accountants left out, that he was cut down from the rope still living, castrated, disembowelled, and the entrails burned in front of him. His head was set on a stake on London Bridge, the first such display the surviving record knows. The 4 quarters went north to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling and St John's Town, which is Perth. There is no known grave. The film gives him a martyr's death before a weeping crowd and an army charging in his name. The record gives a man distributed as a warning across the length of a kingdom. And the king who ordered it. In the film, Edward dies as Wallace dies, tyrant and martyr leaving together. In the record, he lived on nearly 2 years and died on the road north, marching to crush the next rebellion. The war outlived them both. That is the true story. And that is why we call it darker than the film and mean it. And now the strangest thing about the film, the title. No one in William Wallace's world ever called him Braveheart. Not the record, not even the poem. But there is a brave heart in this story, and it sat in another man's chest. Robert the Bruce, the king who finally won the independence Wallace and Murray had fought for, died in 1329, asking that his heart be cut out and carried on crusade. Sir James Douglas carried it in a casket to Spain and died in battle at Teba in 1330. The heart came home and was buried at Melrose Abbey. A lead casket believed to hold it was found and reburied in 1921, found again in 1996 and laid back under the floor in 1998. And the famous cry, Douglas hurling the casket toward the enemy and bidding the dead king's heart lead him. A 16th century addition gave the story that shape. The words we all know came later, still polished by Walter Scott. Legend layered on legend, layered on legend. So whether Hollywood knew it or not, its title echoes the wrong man's chest. The only heart in this story the legend ever called brave went on crusade, a quarter of a century after William Wallace died. That man's story is another film entirely, for another day on this channel. So, the paint is 1,000 years wrong, the kilts 300, the love story is impossible, the law was never real, the bridge is missing, the betrayal is transplanted, and even the title fits another man better. And yet, under one of our own videos, an American viewer wrote something we have not stopped thinking about. He knows the film is not accurate. He said that matters less to him than what it did, showing that Scottish fighting spirit to the world. That it makes Scotland feel, in his words, like a distant cousin. And the record backs him. We can date it the way we dated the kilts. Before the film, around 80,000 people a year climbed to the Wallace Monument. By 1998, 184,000. Years later, asked why they had come, nearly 4 in 10 visitors still named the film. But the feeling is older than Hollywood. The Scots, who scattered across the world, had already raised Wallace in bronze and stone, in Ballarat in Australia in 1889, in Baltimore in America in 1893, a century before a camera rolled. The film did not invent that feeling. It found it, and it carried it to millions the stone never reached. The record can follow William Wallace with unusual detail through his final day, all the way to Smithfield. What it cannot tell you is why a boy in America, 700 years later, feels something when he hears the name. The film got that part right, and that part the record could never hold. Wallace, a name from an old word for outsider. On the man, a nation decided meant home. If your family carries it, or Walsh, or Wallace, or Welch, the same old word is written into your name. Drop your surname below, whatever it is. We research every single one. And if we said a name wrong today, correct us in the comments. We read everyone.